Once known as the father and husband in the 8 Passengers YouTube series, Kevin Franke's attorney now says the father of 6 is fighting for custody of his children.
There's a lot to be told. There's a lot of chapters in this book.
Law&Crime Network crews traveled to Provo, Utah this week to sit down with Kevin Franke's attorney, Randy Kester. He says his client had no idea his children were being abused and instead points the finger at Jodi Hildebrandt, alleging she brainwashed the entire family.
That once she got involved in their lives, it just destroyed his family. It did. And he's now trying to recover from that and put it back together. He wants it back the way it was.
In recent days, Kevin Franke has stopped speaking with his estranged wife, Ruby, after she dropped bombshell news on him during a jailhouse phone call.
He hasn't spoken to Ruby for about 2 weeks now.
So he did speak with her after her arrest, it sounds like then?
He spoke with her, I think there are reports out there actually. He spoke with her a week ago Friday, and that was when he started to realize the broad perspective of the deception that he'd been fed, and in that discussion found out a lot of things from her that he should have been told. He should have been involved, and after the phone call, he just decided that he'd been deceived and hasn't had contact with her since.
In fact, Kevin Franke hasn't even discussed the abuse allegations with his wife.
His backing off from communication with Ruby was because he felt betrayed, he felt deceived, and so he didn't feel like that it would merit any further consultation and discussion between them. But I don't know, he may be following the proceedings, but they're pretty inaccessible. Neither one of us have been willing to drive 250 miles just to go to a short hearing, and it's my understanding that the WebEx links have crashed, and so I just gather information and give it to him about what's going on.
Yeah, that's fair. As far as what Ruby has said to Kevin, has she denied these allegations and said it didn't happen?
They have not had that conversation.
Is there a reason why?
I think because it's pretty apparent to Kevin from the reports that it did happen. He believes his son and the reports that his son has given to law enforcement and others.
Late last month, Franke's 12-year-old son broke free from Jodi Hildebrandt's home in Ivins, Utah, about 250 miles south of this family home in Springville, Utah. The boy ran to a nearby neighbor's home asking for food and water. Investigators found him emaciated with duct tape around his wrists and ankles.
This kid has obviously been, I think he's been detained. He's obviously covered in wounds.
According to Kester, Kevin Franke had no idea what was going on with his children and hadn't even spoken to them in months.
He was shocked, devastated, hurt, felt deceived, didn't know any of that was going on. He hadn't seen his kids for 12 months or more, and didn't know that they were even in Ivins in southern Utah. He didn't even know that they'd been taken down there, or he probably would have objected strongly, but she didn't tell him, and apparently took the kids down there even as early as June, and he knew nothing about it.
Kester alleges that Kevin hadn't seen his children in more than a year, all at the instance of his wife, Ruby Franke.
Kevin very much loved his children and loved his wife and had a strong bond, an exceptionally strong bond with all of his kids. You've seen pictures of their family together. He was involved in all sorts of activities. He was a great dad. But Ruby felt like there were differences in their marriage, and at one point, in conjunction with Jodi Hildebrandt, it was sort of like, we have to separate to save our marriage. You know, we'll keep working on our marriage, but for now, you know, if we're gonna repair our marriage and be back together as a family, you have to be away, and you have to work on yourself, and don't have contact with the kids. Don't have contact with me unless I initiate it.
Last month, both Ruby Franke and Hildebrandt were arrested and charged with 6 counts of aggravated child abuse. Right now, they're being held in the Washington County Jail in southern Utah without bail. But before her arrest, Ruby and the Franke family were already known the world over for their popular YouTube channel, 8 Passengers. The series documented the lives of the Franke family, including Ruby, Kevin, and their 6 children.
Eve has been amazingly well behaved for being in town.
But you yelled at me.
Shh. The fact that I yell at my kids is a secret. We don't want our viewers to know.
Once boasting more than 2 million followers, the YouTube page is now defunct. Kester says the family hasn't created content for the channel in more than a year.
I don't think anything's been posted on that for pretty close to a year and a half. I think January, February of 21, maybe August of 21 is the last time anyone posted anything on there.
Is there a reason that they stopped creating content with the 8 Passengers channel so long ago?
I think that Jodi and Ruby sort of just pirated off that and moved into this Connections entity.
After Ruby Franke's YouTube channel had already taken off, she paired with business partner Jodi Hildebrandt to create new content, offering counseling services for families in need. They called their organization Connections.
Anytime you think, I want, fill in the blank, I don't care what it is, that is not love. Love is a gift that you offer because you have generated it inside yourself. And how do you generate love? Well, the only way to generate love is you use your agency to choose principles of truth.
Kester says he's not even sure how to describe the relationship between Hildebrandt and Ruby Franke.
So we know that they're business partners, but would it be fair to say that Ruby and Jodi are friends?
I don't know. I don't know how to characterize that. I know they did a lot of work together and would often go off together. While Kevin took care of the kids, they would leave and go for days at a time, and while Kevin was taking care of the family until the separation, and then of course he was excluded from all that.
When first responders arrived to Hildebrandt's home last month, they determined 2 of the Franke children required immediate medical attention. In all, 4 of the 6 children were taken into the care of the Division of Children and Family Services. Right now, Kester isn't sure where the kids are being held and says Kevin Franke does not have any contact with them.
I don't know exactly where they are geographically, but the state has foster care placement. They have their own placement at secure facilities, and and I can't comment about where they are, but they are in the state's custody within the state of Utah.
He does know it's his client's ultimate goal to regain complete custody of his children.
And does your client have contact with any of his children who are under the age of 18?
Not yet.
Is he hoping for that contact?
Oh, absolutely. That's his ultimate objective, is to be able to have custody of them and to be with them and to guide them and be their father again and to bring his family back together. That is his sole objective at this point.
Before his wife's arrest, Kester says Ruby Franke called her estranged husband, telling him it was an emergency.
She was working, and she pretty much just said, this is an emergency. Because when she first contacted him, I think it was a text, may have been a phone call, and he responded and said, I'm at work, I need to get back to you. And she essentially said, this is an emergency, I need you to come get the kids. So he, of course, tore down there, not knowing any of the details of all this that was going on till he got there.
When Kevin Franke arrived in southern Utah, he wasn't allowed to see his children.
Was he able to see the kids when he was there?
No.
And is that law enforcement was kind of putting up the barrier?
Yes. Law enforcement and state agents. Yeah, the children had already, 2 of the children, as everyone knows, had already been taken to the hospital. So yeah, he was prevented from taking his kids home.
And is that in relation to the Child Protective Services or the Division of Children and Family Services, because they wanted to make sure that no one was there to abuse the children? Because he's their biological father.
I don't think at that point anyone knew that Kevin wasn't involved in the physical abuse of these kids. And so just out of an abundance of caution, it's my impression that while they did their investigation, they weren't letting anyone have contact with the kids.
But Kester maintains Kevin Franke had no idea his children were in trouble.
And some critics are saying, how could you not know? How could you spend this much time without speaking to your kids? What does he have to say about that?
He was following the advice of who he thought was a professional mental health expert, telling him to stay away. The only way to save his family was to stay apart from his family at that point, while he thought they were working toward reconciliation. He had no idea that there was this kind of abuse going on. She was telling him that everything was blissful and everything was wonderful. That, in conjunction with the fact she didn't tell him that she had taken the kids to southern Utah to be in Jodi's home. He would have resisted that, but she didn't tell him. He was being advised by his mental health care professional to stay away from the family and not contact the kids.
Kester does say before his wife's arrest, Kevin Franke received counseling from Hildebrandt.
During the separation, Kevin was attending men's groups that were facilitated by Jodi, and during those groups, he was being downgraded and diminished and told how bad he was and that he needed to repent, and that the best way to repent was to not infect his family with his problems, and so that's why you need to stay away. He wasn't the only one in those men's groups that was undergoing exactly what he was undergoing at her suggestion and recommendation.
Just so I get a better idea of what these men groups are, would that be, what would that entail? They're going to like a group and kind of talking about things? Who are the people who are kind of like laying down the law, so to speak?
Jodi. And they were Zoom meetings. I don't think they ever met together personally, even though maybe a sponsor of someone would meet personally, but sporadically.
Kester says because of this counseling, Kevin Franke believed his relationship was on the road to recovery.
They were working toward reconciliation. There was no separate maintenance documents. There was no divorce filed because he was being led to believe they were working toward reconciliation. He wanted to be back with his family. He wanted to be back with his wife, but was being told by Jodi and by Ruby that in order to repair all this, you need to stay away. And was being told that, hey, with you away, everything's blissful, the kids are doing well, everything's just great.
On Monday, both Ruby Franke and Hildebrandt were set to appear in Washington County Court for a status hearing discussing bail. Law&Crime Network was at the courthouse when attorneys filed a motion to delay the hearing. Kester tells us the hearing was pushed because attorneys received new and crucial information from law enforcement, but couldn't give us the specifics. He also says his client isn't quite ready to speak publicly.
And when you and I had texted previously, I asked whether Kevin wants to speak, and your reply was interesting to me in that you said Kevin does want to speak, just not now.
Correct.
So, if not now, when?
When the dust has kind of settled. He just doesn't want to jeopardize. He doesn't want to say something because we've committed to the court. We're not going to disparage any of the family. And Kevin's gone above and beyond that. He's not only not disparaged anyone, he's reaching out to try to bring this family closer together and to kind of heal wounds. And so in terms of him speaking out, I think he wants to accomplish the objective that he wants to get his family back together. But I think at some point he'll want to tell the whole story. I just don't think this is a time to declare war. And he and I have counseled, and we believe that this is a time for healing. A lot of bad things have happened to this family, and he values his family and he values his children above all. And he's committed to doing whatever it takes, even if it's him remaining silent. He's committed to doing that in order to make the future better for his children.
Meanwhile, Kevin Franke is fighting for custody of his children through a series of juvenile hearings in north central Utah. Kester tells us those hearings may not remain public for long.
It's pretty much just scheduling. The court is taking under advisement a motion to seal the proceedings and to restrict certain people from the courtroom, and probably a pretty broad swath of people, just to protect the privacy and confidentiality of the things that we're discussing involving the children, because they have a right to have their privacy needs met, and I think it's a good thing.
As Law&Crime Network reported, shocking allegations came out of a previous juvenile hearing when Ruby Franke appeared virtually. She claimed one of her children started having problems at age 3 when they began looking at pornography. While Franke didn't mention the child by name, she alleged her child sexually assaulted one of their younger siblings, which led to that child sexually assaulting other kids. Kester says his client would prefer if future hearings are closed off.
He thinks that it serves his kids' best interest to give them as little of publicity as possible. I mean, I think it was very damaging the last time when the reporter snuck into the courtroom and then divulged very, very confidential and information that Mrs. Franke stated about one of their children. And I just think that was damaging to everyone. It was especially damaging to the child. So I think that's the kind of thing the court's trying to prevent. He wishes it wouldn't have been published, but in terms, because it's involving his son in a very confidential matter, I shouldn't comment about that. I shouldn't comment about my client's belief about that.
Meanwhile, Kester doubles down, saying he believes the entire Franke family was brainwashed at the hand of Jodi Hildebrandt.
It's a very delicate situation. These kids have been horribly, horribly brainwashed, indoctrinated, and it's scary.
Brainwashed by who?
Jodi.
Do you believe that Ruby was brainwashed by Jodi?
Yes. And I say that because everyone, you know, the focus has been on Kevin. Where was he? Why was he absent? How does that all happen? So he was doing that at Ruby's direction, who I think was being directed by Jodi. This is the way that you've got to repair your marriage and repair your family. So they were all sort of kind of being manipulated, and this is just my opinion, by Jodi. And I think she knew what she was doing, and it was causing significant damage. And so when Kevin's critics are out there saying, you know, where was he? He was acting at the direction of what he thought was a competent mental health care provider and advisor. And to me, the better question is, what kind of mental health care provider would advise a family and a husband and wife and a husband and or a father and children that this can repair your family if you just stay away from each other? And I'm confident that she told that to Ruby. I'm confident that the children were being told that, and Kevin was certainly being told that I know what I'm doing, you need to stay away.
Do you believe that Kevin was brainwashed as well?
I do. He's a bright guy, but he was desperate to save his family and save his marriage. He loved his kids, he loved his wife, and he was desperate to have that come back together. But it was Jodi's intervention that prevented that, and it was manipulating him, saying, if you just do this, you know, if you just overcome your greed and your selfishness and your narcissism, you will get your family back together, but you got to stay away and you got to repent. And so he was following, again, what he thought was expert advice, and that's why he was so distraught and felt deceived and disappointed and frightened when this all came out.
Kester says it was Hildebrandt's involvement that unraveled the Franke family.
There's a lot I want to tell you, but probably shouldn't at this point, because it's kind of delicate between the state and him trying to get his kids back. So, but there's a lot to be told. There's a lot of chapters in this book, and the more I dig into it, the more I've said this before and I'll say it again, I think that Jodi is in the middle of all this, and I describe her as an onion with an octopus inside. The more layers you peel back about Jodi's life and connections, every time you peel back a layer, an octopus tentacle comes springing out. There's a lot to be told. This is a fascinating and tragic event in their lives, and will probably have lifelong effects It's gonna take him a long time to help these kids get through the trauma that's been perpetrated on them, but he's up to it, and he's dedicated to doing it.
Kester tells us Franke does want to speak to the media and will do on-camera interviews, just not yet. He says his client is committed to the safety of his children and rebuilding the family bonds. Reporting in Springville, Utah, Sierra Gillespie, Law&Crime Network.